All right. Nice. Yeah, we'll take a reading out of the big book of the 12-step programs. I come from AA, so this is what we use at least in my program. But I think most programs have some sort of rendition of the big book. Yeah. Uh, we don't really go far off, actually. The message of recovery. We don't go far off at all. Um, just look at it from a point of view of not two of the of that kind of idea. Yeah. All right. Let's start here. Brandy, welcome back. Nice. Mhm. Let's take page 68. You don't need a book. I'll read it. I'll read it for us here. All right. Page 68 says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. At this part of the book, they're talking about step 4. So if you're not familiar with the 12-step program, in step 4, you make a list of your resentments, uh, and then who they're about, how they affected you, and then sometimes your part to play. But so when they're saying we reviewed our fears thoroughly, they're talking about this process of step 4, which is a thorough process. Nothing left out. Fearless and thorough. Yeah. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So they're talking about fear here. Yeah. We asked ourselves why we had them, why we had these fears. Yeah. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us, once we had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem, or any other. When it made us cocky, it was even worse. All right. So we put our fears on paper. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? What's after that? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. So it wasn't because self-reliance had failed us. So, as we were talking about last time, self to me is the mental system, which a part of that is J. If I'm relying on that mental system, there's a sense that I'm doing it, but from uh, Buddhist or Hindu philosophy, there is no doer of that mental system, of self, yeah? Self is not, I'm not doing that. So in that case, where does that self come from but the past? Yeah? So the mental system is only a construction of Jay's past. So it takes all the information from the past, and that's how self sees, essentially. That's how Jay sees the world, from its combination of past. Now, I don't know that if I'm living as self, which is before recovery, and even for some time in recovery, I was living as self. So I'm living as the mental system, yeah, that's seeing from the past. But I don't see that it only sees from the past. I just listen to what it says, and then I go that way. Yeah? So relying on self is completely dependent on me taking myself to be that mental movement. Otherwise, I wouldn't rely on it, yeah? But why else wouldn't we rely on it when it's the only voice we hear inside our heads? Yeah. Yeah. So self-reliance failed us, yes? So by the time I got to recovery, I had lost, essentially. I didn't see that it was relying on my own brain, yes, that had failed me, but I definitely had a sense of I was failing because I was in AA. So that was very clear in a way, and my sponsor would make that even more clear. Yeah, that's right. So and then you take step 1, I'm powerless, which would just reaffirm that failure, essentially. So the mental system, when it's talking only from information it got from the past. So, I was living in fear, yeah? Because of this self-reliance on my head. Because the head is only seeing from the past, and the story based on the past is I'm less than, and everything is my fault. And based on that, everything that I'm going to do is going to fail. Yeah? So in that case, I'm living from this standpoint of this mental past. That has me in a constant state of fear and or depression. Because my head story is only that one thing. Now life, yeah, even in recovery, being sober, the head will still present the nugget. But life doesn't confirm that fear at all. Yeah? It's just a mental viewing. This is one thing I notice a lot. It doesn't matter what's happening as far as an event in life, the mental system will take it and override it with its own belief. So like when I went into recovery, for instance, yeah, that the mental system immediately took it, and it took it with its fear. So when I went in right away, the mental system's idea was I'm going to fail at this too. Yeah. Now there was things in my life which were not failing. There was a lot failing, but let's say music, for instance, was not quote unquote failing. It wasn't going the way I wanted it to go, which was world fame and millions of dollars. It wasn't going that way, but it wasn't completely failing, although my mental system overrode it. Yeah, you're failing at this. And then when I went into recovery, the same fear came up, or same story, let's say, and you're going to fail at this. So you can notice that, I feel. And it doesn't matter what's happening around, or what's the event that's taking place in life, the mental system will grab it and override it. That's why relying on self always fails us, yes? Because self still sees from its old conditioning from the past. And in that case, it sees the same way it's always seen. Even if things are going quote unquote successfully, whatever that might be, the mental system story is still not good enough, have to do more. Yeah? Or it will put me, for instance, in the past in the stance of poverty, meaning like you're not gonna have enough. So you always got to keep pushing for more and more. What is that but fear, yes? Based on what? No evidence except its own story, the head's own story. So relying on that story, living in fear completely unnecessarily. Yeah? And then that fear driving this body to depression and then to drink, obviously. Yeah? And then even to go further than that, when it saw there was no way out, drinking wasn't shutting it off completely, then we take other options. So wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? And then the last sentence says, some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other problems. So yesterday, or the last time we were here, took from the 12 and 12, self-confidence being no good, whatever. For the same reason, yes? Because itself only sees from the past. It can't see anything else. It's like Jay can't see any other way. There's nothing new as far as the mental system. It's like the same stories, the same self always manifesting. What's it say? Self manifested in 100 ways or something. Isn't that what has defeated us? It defeats us by our reliance on it. Because I would live as the head, so when the head saw what's happening currently through old eyes, I didn't see that. I just saw what it said and I went with it, yeah? So things could be fine in a situation. My head would say that person hates you, and now I'm on that person essentially. Or I would go somewhere and see a group of musicians. The head would say they're way better than you. You're never going to be that. And then relying on the head, because I was taking myself to be self, yeah, there came a bunch of depression and then drinking and then whatever would come outcome from that. Yeah. So what is that but relying on self? Through the bondage of self, which is my identification as the mental system. So self-reliance will always fail us. Even now, because it's not like the mental system picked up a new bunch of things when it comes to core beliefs. They don't really change. Yeah? The head still has me as worthless. But not being self, you are free from it today. That's why there is a solution. Yeah? The bondage of self is the identification as the thought process. That is the bondage of self. In Buddhism, there's anatta, which there is no self. There's no thing in separate individual thing in here. The bondage of self is a listening to or obeying, let's say. Yeah? I was obeying the head, obeying the mental system, based completely on that's what I was. So there was no putting it into question. Yeah? It was driving, as they say in the big book here. The mental system was driving based on my obedience, because based on my identification. Yeah? I'm obeying the head because I'm taking those thoughts to be my thoughts. And in that, it had me living in a constant state of fear and anxiety. And that can continue on if you start to identify with it again, because it will sell you the old candy. Because it doesn't have any new candy. Yeah? It's like a convenience store you go into. You're expecting new stuff, but it only has old products. Yeah? That's like the mental system. So relying on that will have us living in the same old fear as always. It doesn't have like new roads, you know? You quit identifying as the mental system, and then there's space for something else to happen, which for me is good enough. That's enough, yeah? But that brought a peace which was way above and beyond what I was hoping for. Yeah. So the fear is triggered, or the anxiety, the looking forward to what the head thinks is going to happen. Like for me, the head is, when it looks forward, it just sees failure, yeah? So if I'm living as that, if I'm identified as self, when it sees forward, it just sees failure. In that case, I'm not going to really want to do nothing, because it's just going to sell me failure. That's what's coming. Living in that fear or that idea, yeah? That idea based on the past. And then there's the whole sense that I'm doing that idea, but there is no doer. That idea is completely formulated from what has happened in the past. The brain has learned that idea. Yeah? It's a false idea, but if I identify with it, it will just be fear and anxiety. You can see it in your own experience. Just watch what your head says. You might have a little bit of a different brand, but if you're like me and in the program and here, it's probably not that different. It's probably an anxiety about what's going to happen based on what happened when I was 6 or something, you know? And based on that anxiety, I'll be depressed. Yeah. And that self will take that old story right into recovery. It'll grab onto recovery, and then it will paint it the same color, essentially. Everybody here is stupid. I'm smarter than everybody. This is like the same color it paints everything, yeah? Why is it trying to put me above everybody else? Because it really believes that I'm less than. That's what self has me as, the mental system. So in order to counter that, yeah, the next move is I'm better than everybody and everybody's dumb. And what does that do but isolate me? This is all based on self-reliance. Yeah. Ah. To not have to listen to that story would open up a bunch of new options. Like maybe I can listen to something else. Let's call it the infinite rather than the finite story of the mental J. And then what does the future hold? Who knows, yeah? Who knows what this talk even holds? Forget the future. But the mental system is projecting a bunch of ideas based on past. Relying on that, you live in fear and anxiety, and then you want to drink or use or do whatever you're going to do, yeah? The beauty, I feel, of the program, it just says put faith in something else. Yeah? And then look at self and how it's defeated us. It's defeated us because we listen to it as it. That's how the mental system defeats us. We identify as it. When the head says, these are my thoughts, it's just taken to be so. You know? But if you put the faith in something else, it comes away from that thing we call self, small s self. And taking faith out of that and putting in something else, if you're in the program I'm in, life just goes a lot better. That proves something, yeah? And that's got really long legs, I feel. Like, you don't rely on any of the thoughts. Because after a while, you see that they're all conditioned. And that's a great relief. Because based on everything's going to fail, if I'm going to do anything, it means I'm going to have to work way harder than I actually have to work, based on the reliance on the mental system story. It's all through the identification as that mental system being mine. Yeah? Now that my thought, we were talking about yesterday, I think yesterday, that my thought is that is the to me like the ground floor of self. That's what all the other thoughts walk on, yeah. Me. The self-centered, the pivot point of self-centeredness, the thought me, being this body. Yesterday we were talking about Nisargadatta and you saying you are the bodiless, you know. So that relying on that mental system, which can only see from the past, it's formulating ideas about what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the future. Living as that presents only fear and anxiety because it's not seeing clearly, you know? And based on that, there's a bunch of discomfort. And based on that discomfort, we want to get out of that discomfort. So we end up using or drinking or whatever's going to take place. Or we become addicted to spiritual practice, which is this is another move that my head's made before. It's going to go right from alcohol and then it's going to go straight to spirituality. Spiritual practice of sorts, yeah. And if we're still identifying with it, we won't see that addiction move. And that's just like, at least in my experience, that is like the same bondage in many ways. Yeah. So that's on page 68. If there's any questions or something, please feel free to put it in the thing. Hannah, welcome. 15 years, nice. Asheville. The next paragraph of that goes right into the higher power. Perhaps there is a better way than relying on self. Perhaps there is a better way. This brings up something, actually. Yeah, I don't know why I just thought of this. But in the doctor's opinion of this book, it essentially says that the doctor can't help the alcoholic. But go to this program, this 12-step thing, this seems to work. Yeah, perhaps there's a better way. We think so. Self is conditioned. So the mental movement, the mental life is conditioned, meaning you're not initiating those thoughts and ideas. Yeah. They're, because of what they would call emptiness in Buddhism, nothing has any meaning. Yeah? There's no doer of the mental system, so it's getting its view from something. That's called the past. Yeah. So that mental movement is conditioned. Now, because addiction is like a hyper self-centeredness, it spins like super fast, let's say. At least in my experience, this is what goes down. Yeah. So the view from the past, which is presenting all of this failure, my fault, whatever it's going to present, yeah, is going to induce tons of fear and anxiety. Now the idea that I'm doing that movement has been uprooted because I tried to change those thoughts and that failed. Yeah? For a reason that I kind of misunderstood the program for a while. And I thought, when I took it, I thought self was going to change. This is part of what the head grabbed onto, yeah? Colored the program. It took it and it said, okay, now I'm going to change. Yeah? That's not what the program is saying. The program is saying, you'll change as a loss of faith in self. But the head took it as, okay, self is now going to change a lot. That failed. And I believe that's why the doctor's opinion is the way it is. Because psychology is about morphing the mental system or trying to move it around and move it into a certain way. But not being the doer and it being conditioned, you can't manipulate the real bang, like the root beliefs of that mental system. So really the only hope for us is to lose faith in that mental system. So that when it suggests crazy things that are not even close to what's happening, we're not trying to manipulate it. We just lose faith in it. Yeah? It's like somebody talking over here that you took advice from your whole life. Let's call that self. And then the program says, put faith in this thing, not this thing. This thing keeps talking. Yeah? It keeps talking, and you'll notice it has the same ideas as it's always had, but this program is a loss of faith in this. It's not about changing this. This doesn't really change all that much. Its story presents much of the same things. I thought it was going to change, and I relapsed once, and I almost relapsed a second time, based on the idea that I thought self was going to change into a great, compassionate, non-judgmental self. But that's based on the idea that I was doing it. Yeah? That's based on the idea that I was doing that self. You're not doing self. It's conditioned. The way it sees is like its own little view from the past. Losing faith in the idea that it was going to change and see quote-unquote soberly or perfectly was one of the greatest weights lifted for me in recovery. Forget it changing. Lose faith in the thought system. Specifically in the idea that it's your thought system. Yeah. And then I noticed if I parsed out alcoholic thoughts to quote unquote regular thoughts, I was still completely tied to the alcoholic ones. Because if I put a little bit of faith in some of self, I'm putting all faith in all self. Because there aren't two selves. There's just one mental system. And it's dualistic. It's going this way, quote unquote good thoughts, quote unquote bad thoughts. If I listen to some, I'm listening to all. Because I'm listening to some as mine. And that will attach me to the other side, which are the thoughts and whatever that induce insane amounts of anxiety and stuff, yeah? So perhaps there is a better way. It says, we think so, yeah? And then it says, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. So I'm now trusting and relying upon something greater than myself. Myself being what but a bundle of thoughts based on the past. And then will self change? Just wait and see, but at least lose faith in it. Because it's not what you are anyways. You are the hearing of self. The constant listening to that mental system. That's why we can sit here and talk about it. And this book is incredible because it puts it in like perfect detail, you know. So then it says we trust infinite God rather than finite self. So we trust that infinite openness. Let's say if you want to look at it from the standpoint of Buddha nature or whatever, call it God or call it a peach, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But we trust that more than we trust finite self. What is finite self but something that is born and will die? What is finite self aside from something that is born and something that will die? Like all of the thoughts which are born and die. This body which is born and dies. Trusting that will have us living in constant fear and anxiety, which will have us always wanting to drink, yeah? Or even worse, always fighting, not drinking or using. So perhaps there is a better way. We think so. We lose faith in the individual and we put it into something greater, and then this individual life goes better. As paradoxically as that may seem to the mental system. It's like, what is in the body's way but J itself? Yeah. That's why when I go to meetings, I say, hi, my name's Jay and I'm an alcoholic. Because Jay is alcoholic. The thinking is alcoholic. It's super self-centered. It has tons of self-pity, self-seeking. Yeah. That's the program of Jay. Relying on that, how could it not fail? It's going to fail. You don't even have to be an alcoholic or an addict or something, because that's just how the mental system works. It's a self-centered system. Yeah. Relying on that is a very claustrophobic, isolating situation. Wow. What a book. All right, why don't we open it up if there's any questions or things to share. Feel free to put them into the little chat box there. Or feel free to just say hello.